Are you wondering what cherry eye is in a Boston Terrier, or for that matter, dogs in general? In this video, I talked to Dr. Reinhard. She shares with us a lot of great information on whether or not it's painful, kind of what you can do personally, and be sure to stay till the end because she's going to explain what a veterinarian can do to help fix this problem. Coming up. Hey everybody, welcome to the Boston Terrier Society YouTube channel. Consider subscribing if you're someone who wants to learn more about the breed, learn what it's like to be an owner, hear expert interviews like the one today, or connect with other Boston Terrier lovers just like yourself. I'm Donnie Gardner, the founder of BostonTerrierSociety.com, and that is Bella, my Boston of over 10 years. She is taking a nap in the sun. But today what I want to talk about, it's kind of dogs in general, but cherry eye in dogs. Now I had somebody recently on Twitter ask me about this, and I decided to bring Dr. Reinhard on just to answer this question because a lot of people, is it painful to your dog? What can you do about it? Is there any permanent fixes that you can do? And that's what Dr. Reinhard's answering today. Without further ado, Dr. Reinhard, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey Donnie, it's good to see you again. Thanks for having me back on the Boston Terrier Society YouTube channel.
My first question is, why do Boston Terriers, and for that matter, dogs in general, get cherry eyes?
Have you ever noticed that little tissue in the corner of your pet's eye? That normal tissue is called the third eyelid, and that little guy serves many important functions, one of which is producing tears to help lubricate the eyes. Within the third eyelid, there's actually a gland in there called the gland of the third eyelid that produces tears to help keep the eye lubricated. With a cherry eye, what happens is that gland moves out of its normal position and actually prolapses. So this condition, cherry eye, is also known as a prolapse of the third eyelid gland. It can look pretty scary because it's essentially a bulging, round, smooth, red tissue that protrudes from the eye.
Now, when a dog has cherry eyes, is it painful?
I would say typically cherry eyes are not really that painful. Sometimes there can be some secondary inflammation and irritation, but most of the time, these do not cause any pain. That being said, if the cherry eye persists for a long period of time, it can actually lead to dry eye. Because remember, that little gland in the third eyelid produces tears. If that gland is out of position for too long, it can actually stop producing normal amounts of tears, leading to dry eye. And dry eye can become uncomfortable and painful.
What actually causes cherry eyes, and why does it develop in dogs?
The cause of cherry eye is thought to be genetic. Remember that little gland in the third eyelid? It's held in place by connective tissue. With the genetic abnormality, those connective tissues are not as strong as they should be. The laxity in those tissues leads to the ability for that gland to pop out of its normal position. It's believed that this is genetic because certain dog breeds seem to be more predisposed to this.
Will cherry eyes go away on their own? And what can owners do just kind of help their dog with this prolapse?
Typically, cherry eyes will not go away on their own. I know there's quite a few things online for home remedies for cherry eyes. And some of those may be, massaging the lower eye and in this area to get it to go back into place, or applying a warm compress. Sometimes these things can help temporarily, but honestly, a lot of times the cherry eye will just recur even after it's put back in place. Remember that the cause of the cherry eye is from this connective tissue laxity. Just by replacing it or pushing it back in, that doesn't solve the problem of the connective tissue laxity, so most likely it's just going to keep popping out over and over again. Another important thing to note is that if your Boston gets a cherry eye in one eye, then most likely it's also going to happen on the other side. I wouldn't say that this is always the case, but I've definitely seen quite a few patients who get a cherry eye on one side and then also on the other side. That's why I think it's important to be sure to have your veterinarian check out the eye if you do notice a cherry eye.
Okay, since cherry eye doesn't really go away on its own. What can a veterinarian do to help fix this problem?
There's a few different procedures that your vet may recommend to fix this. The Morgan pocket technique is probably one of the most commonly recommended procedures by veterinarians because it has the lowest rate of recurrence. And essentially what your veterinarian would do is make a few incisions over that gland, push it back into place, and then stitch it up so that it can't pop out again. This procedure has a pretty high success rate, and I would say 90% of patients are not going to have problems with that cherry eye in the future. The second technique that your veterinarian may consider is the tacking technique. So essentially, this is just taking the prolapsed third eyelid gland and just tacking it back in place with a stitch. The issue with this procedure is that there's a little bit higher of a recurrence rate. The last option that your veterinarian may discuss with you is actually excising that gland. I typically do not recommend this option because that gland serves such important function for producing tears in the eye that removing it may lead to dry eye and more problems.
Okay, now if someone sees cherry eyes in their dog for the very first time, what should they do at this point?
I recommend contacting your veterinarian as soon as you notice a cherry eye in your dog. That way they can examine the eye and give you special guidance on what to do with your pet. It's especially important to contact your veterinarian if you notice your dog squinting, pawing at the eye, rubbing the eye, or any kind of eye discharge or eye redness. These symptoms might suggest that there's a more serious issue with the eye.
Well, I think this has been really helpful. I really appreciate you coming on the show today, Dr. Reinhard.
Thank you so much for having me on the Boston Terrier Society YouTube channel. It's been great.
I hope this video helps answer your question in regard to cherry eye. Now, I know some of you want to try to figure out how to save money whenever it comes to going to the vet and your overall medical bills. So Emily and I recently had purchased PediSure. It's not a traditional insurance program. It's essentially a health savings plan where it takes 25% off nearly all vet medical bills. Here, Emily and I, we had just gotten Bella's teeth cleaned. And we did some other things as well, but it was going to be $715. And using PediSure, it saved us $139, which is great because we only paid $100 for an entire year for Bella. And we also had her annual checkups, which I can't remember the exact amount. I think it took like $40 off or something like that. So it's already paid for itself. So I highly recommend checking out PediSure. It's going to be in the show notes below. Or if you want to get the traditional insurance, where you pay your premiums and you reach a deductible. Now, some of those might have pre-existing conditions guidelines, so you'll need to check those out. But if you want to get a quote on that as well, I'll leave it in the show notes for you if you want to check that out, just to save money if your dog is constantly having some sort of medical issue. But once again, with Bella, she doesn't have a lot of medical issues, and it still made sense for us to buy PediSure this year just because we knew we were going to be spending more than $400, 25% of $100. We knew we were going to get that money back by getting PediSure. If you want to get more videos about Boston Terrier health-related issues, you can check those videos out here. There's a nice little playlist, or you can check out my latest video here. Consider subscribing if you want to learn more about Boston Terriers. And until next time, life is better with a Boston.